right back in 5. Y'all enjoy.
NPR podcasts are now available on every platform. Check out all our shows at npr.org/podcasts. That's npr.org/podcasts.
Live from NPR News in Washington, I'm Jack Speer. George H.W. Bush was remembered as a great and noble man by his eldest son, former President George W. Bush, today. NPR's Brian Naylor reports the elder Bush was memorialized at a state funeral at the Washington National Cathedral.
The ceremony was both solemn and joyful as friends and family of the 41st president gathered at the cathedral. Among those attending were President Trump and the 4 other living presidents. Bush biographer John Meacham recounted the story of Bush being shot down over the Pacific during World War II.
George Herbert Walker Bush was America's last great soldier statesman, a 20th century founding father.
Following the state funeral, Bush's body was flown back to Texas. He'll be buried alongside his wife Barbara and his daughter Robin at the Bush Presidential Library. Brian Naylor, NPR News, Washington.
New documents released today by the North Carolina State Board of Elections are shedding light on the efforts by the man at the center of an alleged election fraud scheme in the state's 9th district. As NPR's Miles Parks explains, the State Board of Elections is still probably weeks away from finishing its investigation.
It's still not certain whether the vote-by-mail operation McCrae Dallas ran in Bladen County was illegal, but it was expansive. Dallas was paid by a consulting firm hired by Republican Mark Harris, who currently leads the Democrat in the congressional race by a slim margin. Of the 1,300 or so absentee ballot requests that Bladen County received, Dallas turned in almost half of those on behalf of voters. That in and of itself is not a crime. What investigators are looking into now, though, is whether Dallas had a role in manipulating or even handling those ballots once they went out. That would be a crime, and it's something a number of voters have alleged. North Carolina law allows for a new election to be called if results are considered by the Bipartisan Board of Elections to be tainted. Miles Parks, NPR News.
For the first time since announcing plans to lay off thousands of workers across the country, General Motors CEO Mary Barra is publicly speaking out about changes at the company, following a Capitol Hill meeting today with Ohio senators concerned about the impact on workers in their state. Barra telling reporters the automaker is also concerned at the moment with the displaced workers.
It's incredibly difficult to make these types of decisions, so our focus is on the GM team members that are impacted, making sure they understand all of their opportunities.
GM is considering closing a plant in Lordstown, Ohio permanently, though lawmakers asked Barra to consider building other vehicles there. Moving off the special counsel's Russia investigation, some prosecutors are now saying they intend to ramp up their probe of foreign lobbying efforts by 2 major Washington firms. The probe was reportedly been quiet for months, and special counsel Robert Mueller referred it to authorities. According to reports, prosecutors have begun to interview witnesses in questions related to the Podesta Group and Mercury Public Affairs. U.S. financial markets are closed today. You're listening to NPR. New research shows that carbon dioxide from industry and transportation is on the upswing. NPR's Christopher Joyce reports on what that means for climate change.
Carbon dioxide is the main greenhouse gas that warms the atmosphere. After leveling off for 3 years, CO2 emissions rose in 2017 and even more this year. Reporting in the journal Environmental Research Letters, scientists say much of the increase is due to a resurgence in coal use in China. India also continues to build new coal power plants. In the U.S. and Europe, emissions of CO2 from transportation are up due to bigger cars and more driving miles. Scientists say the rise will make it harder to keep global temperatures from rising to dangerous levels unless the trend is reversed. Christopher Joyce, NPR News.
More allegations are surfacing about former CBS boss Les Moonves, including charges that he destroyed evidence and misled investigators in an attempt to salvage his reputation and a lucrative severance package. The New York Times, citing a report prepared by CBS lawyers, had to determine whether the former CBS exec violated terms of his employment agreement. The Times says the 59-page report will be presented to CBS's board before the company's annual meeting next week. It says Moonves could be denied a $120 million severance package after he quit in September amid numerous allegations of sexual impropriety from multiple women. That includes reports of a network employee who allegedly was on call to perform oral sex for Moonves. Crude oil futures prices closed lower today. Oil was down 0.7% to end the session at $52.89 a barrel in New York. I'm Jack Speer, NPR News, in Washington.
And we're back. Thank you so much for listening to WBHM Digital Broadcasting out of Birmingham, Alabama. You're listening to Paranormal Experienced Radio, and I am Kat Hobson, your host. We have had I can't believe this hour has gone. It's just astounding to me. But we are beginning our second hour, and Gav had left us a little bit of a cliffhanger there, just perhaps a bit. And you were describing how you were reacting to what you felt was a home invasion.
Yeah, it's terrifying. It was something that you're not necessarily prepared for. And before I just continue the story, Ray Davis has asked a question, and I will answer that as soon as I've told this little bit or more of the story.
There.
Yes, brilliant question.
Brilliant man.
Brilliant man. Yes, I've just invited him to join me on Facebook. He looks like a kind of guy I could have a long chat with and certainly read his amazing books.
So many rabbit holes.
Oh, I know. I love it. And that's the great thing about this subject. It just goes, you think it's a haunting, and then there's, Haunted Horror of Haversham. You think it's just a haunting, and there's elements of time travel, remote viewing, reincarnation, poltergeist, demons, dimensional beings. There's pretty much everything in there but Bigfoot, which who knows?
Hard enough, maybe.
So when I left the bedroom, I was absolutely terrified, and my heart was pounding in my head, and I didn't know what to expect. I did. I expected to see the windows smashed in, the curtains billowing, and just our house, everything we'd worked so hard, just upside down, destroyed by burglars. And I was hoping it happened so quick. So from the window being smashed to me going down the stairs, which was the most awful time of my life, it was 30 seconds. And I was kind of hoping one of the neighbours had heard it, or someone passing by, even though it was like the middle of the night, or the police were on their way, anything. And I remember being so hesitant at the top of the landing, just looking down into the gloom with just the light from the landing behind me. And the light for the living room was downstairs by the bathroom. And taking those stairs, I was so trepidatious. I just expected to see a shadow, an arm grab me and just pull me down. And it was terrifying. So I went down very cautiously and I turned on the light. And the house was nothing had happened. The window hadn't been kicked in. The doors were all locked from the inside. The windows were all locked. There was no evidence that anyone had been in the house, apart from the CDs were all in a spiral on the carpet, and a picture of me and my girlfriend had been put by the door. And there was no way. And that was it. And she came down. She said, she was shouting, what's going on? What's going on? You okay? You okay? And she came down, and I was just stood there, and she kicked those CDs, which I kind of regretted, because we could have got a picture. That doesn't prove anything. It doesn't prove anything.
I know, but it would have been nice to have for you.
It'd been nice to have for me. People say, well, you could have done it yourself, which is true. Maybe we did. Maybe it was hallucinogenics or psychological reaction to something. Who knows? And when she saw the picture, she just broke down and cried, because she said it wants us out. Because a few weeks before, we'd called in a medium. And then in 1989, in that time frame, Anne had gone to stay with her mum, and Di had turned into a bit of a paranormal investigator, because there was communication coming through his radio, and he would often sit up, like sat on a stool next to the radio in the kitchen, and sometimes it would produce signal even though it was unplugged. But which is still possible. You can still receive, if there's a bit of electrical charge. So he looked at all rational. So he'd sit there with a pen and paper, and he would listen to the radio, and there was a song that he could hear being sung by a child or a woman or someone very quietly. And the song, I found the song in 1930s cartoons in America. It was very popular in America around 1905 to 1910, and apparently originated as a vaudeville song here in London in the UK. And it was just a nonsense song. It was just like a funny song. We had weird rhyming, and people used to dance along and copy it, right? And it was a bit of like a weird song nursery rhyme. And it was something along the lines of, who cut the arms of Grandad's vest? There's a flea in Lizzie's ear, go get the axe. So Di is kind of like writing this down, trying to make sense of it, thinking that I remember as a child that my radio next to my bed on the FM channel, you could actually pick up the police and the pizza delivery guy and the ambulance services. And it was great. It was, you'd be listening out and nothing really happened, but it was just, you just felt, you were part of something special.
Yes.
So he rationalized it all as that. So he went back to sleep on the sofa because he had a broken leg, and the phone went and it was very late. And he just thought it was his wife calling because she hadn't called him all day just to say sorry. And he said that a voice came through on the phone. There was just a voice saying, who cut the arms of Daddy's vest, or it basically is repeating the song. And he said he was sat there in the dark with the phone against his ear. And he said he put the phone down and he said, it was the most scariest thing he's ever seen. He said, from the kitchen, this 7-foot shadow, darker than the night, just came from the kitchen and just walked up the stairs. And he could hear the stairs creaking as this thing made its way upstairs. And then he could hear it rummage around.
It had mass.
It had a mass. And he was so scared. And obviously he's got a broken leg and it's the middle of the night. He was so scared. The only thing he could think to do, and this guy's in his 50s now, and the only thing this guy could think to do, was to pull the duvet over his head. And we've all done that. Well, I used to as a little kid. If you couldn't see it, it didn't exist.
And it couldn't see you.
And it couldn't see you. And he said it was the most terrifying night of his life. Now, our neighbours in 2002, they'd seen the angry man come down the stairs and sit in a chair. And he was the manifestation of whatever this was. So Ray had asked earlier, Mr. Ray Davies had asked earlier about, do these things feed off negative energy? And yes, it does. And it will invoke it in a number of ways. It will create insecurity, it'll create doubt. Both Anne and Di suffered from very low self-esteem, as did I. Anything that kind of gave you joy, it would kind of find a way to disrupt, And when it was, it sounds insane, and maybe people out there can help me articulate this, or maybe you can, is that it's almost like it got so hungry that it would have to play the angry man card to really invoke that fear, that terror, so it could get like a good feast off you. And we talk about attachments. And what if this thing, one lady described it to me, a British lady was talking to me earlier on, and she described it as these things. She was like, yeah, these things are real. She said, dimensional beings, these are real. She said, no one can fight them. She's like a hardcore spiritualist medium with all these abilities and gifts, which I don't. Hi, Susan, by the way, in the chat room. And she said this thing will envelop us like a blob. We can't see it. We can't feel it. All we know is different. Our mood changes, that we become very insecure. We become angry, depressed, all those negative parts of our psyche. And then we're walking around with this thing on us, and we're going to bed with this thing on us. And for example, I could come into Kat's house and, I'm like, Kat, I'm feeling really down and really depressed. And Kat's like, hey, don't worry, Gavin, you have a chat. And she makes me a cup of coffee, and maybe you do like a guided meditation. Maybe you sage me. Maybe you do something. And I leave that house thinking, do you know what? I feel really good. Oh my God, what a great friend Kat is. She's really helped me. But what's happened is this thing is like, Kat's far more tastier than Gav. And what it does, it'll drop off and it will just skulk off and it'll go and find a corner or whatever it does. And like a spider, like a parasite, it'll just wait. And it will begin again to grow and spread like a mold, like a rot. And then in a couple of months then, Kat is feeling down, depressed. She doesn't know what's going on. And this is how this thing spreads. And that's just conjecture. I can't prove that anything like that is real. I wasn't there in 1989 to 91. I was certainly there in 2002. And I saw things that were terrifying, absolutely terrifying. And there's nowhere you can turn to. You know, the police aren't going to go, oh, yeah, we'll be over tomorrow. We'll arrest it. You can't handcuff this thing, you know. And as Rose, the medium, said, it killed it. There was nothing